Good. Good morning. My name's Amy Hudnall. I'm the Deputy Director for the Center of Innovation for Aerospace for the state. I'm pleased to welcome you today to the Import Opportunity Session. Let me start by asking everybody to turn off your cell phones, put them on mute, and find your way to your seats. We'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to introduce Chris Brooks from the Journal of Commerce, and he's going to be the moderator for today's session.
Good morning, and thank you, Amy, and thank you to Paige and this whole organization. This is my first experience with the Georgia Logistics Summit, and I can honestly say it's been quite the experience. It's been impressive. I hope everybody has gotten the opportunity to hear the fantastic presentations that we've had in the first day and a couple hours, and have gotten to see the floor at Modex. So over the next, again, as Amy said, my name is Chris Brooks. I am Executive Editor with the Journal of Commerce, and I'm going to be moderating this session. So over the next hour or so, we'll be talking about trends, opportunities, and challenges in the inbound supply chain, where there's no shortage of events impacting the way imports enter this country. It starts with the decision-making on the front end of the supply chain, where global manufacturers produce the goods that fill ships sailing the Trans-Pacific and other major shipping lanes, and that ultimately end up on store shelves. That decision-making is getting more complicated as wages soar in China, the so-called world's factory, since that country joined the World Trade Organization 13 years ago. Those wage increases have spawned a middle class hungry not only for the very goods its workers have produced, but also upscale products. To meet the demand of that growing consumer population, China has turned inward, producing more goods for its own domestic use. At the same time, cost-conscious manufacturers are re-examining their supply chain expenses and risk, and they're looking for alternatives. Is China going away? Of course not. It is and will continue to be a dominant source of U.S. imports for the foreseeable future. But we're living in a new supply chain world, one in which sourcing is more diversified and, in some cases, moving closer to destination markets. Consider these facts. Chinese wages on average have increased 15% a year for the past several years, and are now at or near par with wages in Mexico. Foxconn, the Taiwanese company that produces virtually all Apple products and employs 1.2 million people, is looking to move some of its production out of China and into Mexico, and perhaps even to the U.S. Containerized imports from China increased about 4% year over year in 2013, about the rate of overall Trans-Pacific import growth, but far from the growth rates that doubled that or more over much of the last 13 years. By comparison, imports from Vietnam last year grew 10%. Central and South American countries such as Guatemala, Chile, and Colombia showed similar growth, and the Caribbean as a whole was up nearly 25%. Here at home, importers are dealing with any number of challenges. Port limitations that prevent the world's largest ships from calling all but a few ports. Chassis and drayage issues that are creating massive delays at the gates of some of the nation's largest ports. A crumbling inland infrastructure. And coming your way this spring, tough negotiations on a new ILWU contract at West Coast ports that, in the best case, will lead to headaches and sleepless nights among importers, and in the worst case, make this winter's chaos seem like a walk in the park. So these are just some of the trends and issues that we've been covering at the Journal of Commerce over the last several months. I hope you've been reading us. If you're not, you should be. There are also some of the considerations this panel of varied importer interests is and will be dealing with over the next several months as well. It gives me great pleasure to introduce that panel now. We're going to start, and we're going to just go right down the line. I'll keep the introductions quite brief. You all have your program guides where their full bios are included. But we're going to start now with Delia Victorino. She urged me to get that correct. I hope I got it close. Delia is Manager of Warehousing and Logistics for Chicken of the Sea International. And she's going to kick us off. And welcome to the stage, Delia.
Do I need to key up my presentation? Good morning. There are funny things when you work for Chicken of the Sea. You don't get a normal response, right? There are three things you get. You get, I know the mermaid, or also I grew up eating Chicken of the Sea, or you get, I remember Jessica Simpson questioning whether or not you guys can tuna or chicken. For the record, we can tuna. So with that said, we'll jump into the exciting industry of tuna. So you guys know us as Chicken of the Sea. We're celebrating our 100th year. We're very excited about that. But you guys might not know who we're owned by. We are owned by Thai Union Frozen, which is a $3.8 billion company. We're vertically integrated and the world's largest canned tuna manufacturer. They are also the #1 seafood processor in Thailand and the #1 shrimp importer to the US. They specialize in shelf-stable for refrigerated and frozen seafood. You can see there that we have graphic companies we work with, canned companies we work with, as also shrimp feed mill companies we work with, so we find it to be a very big asset to us to be a part of their company. Getting into what I love the most and what I came from is our process. I'm briefly going to run you through this. So there are two ways that you process tuna: round fish straight from the sea, or loins, which we do out of our facility in Georgia Canning. The loins are basically round fish that has been deboned, blood vessels removed, pre-cooked, put into a vacuum bag, and then frozen and shipped here on 40-foot containers. Once it arrives to the port of Savannah, it goes to one of our 4 warehouse freezer cold storage warehouses, the one inside of our plant, which sometimes gets very full. We also use Flint River, Claxton Storage, and Dot Foods. In total, those storage facilities hold about 5,000 tons. We can samples from the loin batches to test that they may meet our standards before production. So before we even run it through the line, we run a small batch from that loin to make sure we like the way it comes out in canning. The loins are then thawed, pre-cooked, and then put in through our filling line. Once it goes through the filling line, it goes to the media. It actually gets the media, whether it's water or oil. Once that's done, it's sealed and put into a retort where it's commercially sterilized. Once that's done, it goes into a QA where we open it up and we test it for the 3 things that you must learn when you go into food. You look at if it looks good, if it smells good, and if it tastes good. If it doesn't pass the first 2, you do not touch it. So once that's done and it's past QA, it then goes to label and casing. Once it's done at label and casing, it goes to our 6 DCs and then goes to our wonderful customers like Target. Wonderful customer. I'm not kissing up at all, right? We're gonna go into finished good FCLs. So these are the amount of containers that we import within the last 2 years, roughly about 2,400 containers. Those are 20-foot containers of not only tuna, we do salmon, oysters, clams, sardines. As you can see from last year, we've done pretty much the same. The majority of it comes from our owners in Thailand and also Vietnam. Going on to raw material. Raw material or reefers, those are the refrigerated containers that we bring into the Port of Savannah. We do about 1,100 containers a year. The price of loins this year in Ecuador has increased. Therefore, a lot of that has gone to the European market. We've leaned a lot last year on China. We also started sourcing from the Solomon Islands and Vietnam. And these are actually 40-foot reefer containers. This is a map of our six distribution centers within the US. Custom Goods, which is in Los Angeles. Acme, which is in Colorado and mainly used for pickup customers. Shippers in Dallas. LeGroux in Chicago. And PSS New Jersey. Pencer SC in Jacksonville. And as you can see, that wonderful arrow at our plant in Lyons, Georgia. At the bottom, you will see the percentage of our product received at each DC. This is also both import and domestic shipments. Los Angeles, Jersey, and Chicago are our busiest warehouses and carry the most inventory. They carry about 3,300 to 5,500 pallets of our product. This is our truck versus intermodal, which hasn't changed very much in the last 2 years. We move about 2,700 loads a year. I'm not sure whether the balance is good between intermodal and truck. We see various things. Damages seem to be about the same. With cans and the way they're strapped down, you get a lot of damages with rim riders, but I also get that on trucks. So right now, we're trying to find out if this is the right mix. It's been working for us to date, though. LTL, I'd rather not see LTL on there at all because it's very expensive, but when customers want it yesterday, we do what we have to do to get it there. I want to talk briefly about the improvements and strengths of our company. Tying and frozen is definitely a big strength within our company. It allows us to hedge on the market of intelligence, and it also gives us the ability to buy raw material and loins and finished product. They also have a global innovation center, which is in Bangkok, where we have the heads of all of our brands, MW Brands, Chicken Lacy Frozen Foods, that gets together to meet and talk about innovation. Innovation is the core to us getting better at what we do. There's only so much you can do with tuna. So we're trying to add things, make ready-to-eat meals for everyone because we feel that that's the way it's going to keep us going and growing. Georgia canning is definitely one of our biggest strengths. Georgia canning is a big competitive advantage because of the Port of Savannah and how close we are to our East Coast customer base. Our facility is 245,000 square feet, sitting on 34 acres of land. We have the state-of-the-art machinery that also is produced in the United States. We are very close to our vendors, whether it be labels, cans, and even a soybean crushing plant that we source from in Valdosta. Sorry if I messed up Valdosta. I don't know if it's Valdosta, sorry. We average about 34,000 cases a day, and that's on a standard case, which is a 48 case 5-ounce can. Our biggest achievement when we moved to Georgia is our turnaround time. We moved from Samoa packing, which is my background. So we moved from Samoa packing, which moved from 6 weeks lead time to 14 days. We find one of our strengths also to be our distribution center. As you saw on the map, we have 6 distribution centers, which are all very close to our customers. The improvements that we are making and that we're making in the process of doing is our lean end-to-end supply chain program. This helps us look at how we manage our materials, our production schedule, our planning, and our shipping. It's basically going to identify the activities in our current operations to help us modify it to make it more efficient at service levels and also at a lower cost. So basically, we want to provide more for less money. We want reliable carriers, but not just service providers. We need to engage them and make them strategic partners in a part of our business. So that's basically what we're focusing on. KPIs. Every company has KPIs. On-time shipment, on time to the day, on time to the hour. Basically what we're doing is we're taking our top 10 customers and we're going to mirror their KPIs to ours. We all get scorecards, but they're all different. So we need to make sure that we're in alignment with them, making their expectations our goals. So I hope that I've brought some clarification on tuna to you guys, and that's pretty much it. I wrapped it up. So thank you very much. I appreciate being here.
So we're just going to get Kyle's presentation up here. Great. And to introduce Kyle Fletcher is General Manager of Tractor Supply's 800,000 square foot regional and import distribution facility in Macon. And he's going to talk about some DC activity. And thank you again, Delia. That was fantastic and some really excellent content.
Hey, look at that. Success. All right, good morning, everybody. Like Chris said, I run the Macon Distribution Center for Tractor Supply, and it's a little bit of a unique building for Tractor in the sense that it is part regional distribution center where we service our stores out of, and then part import center where we bring containers from the Port of Savannah. So it's really the first run for Tractor doing a two-part building. I've got a history in the import business. I came from grocery distribution for a long time, but also intermixed in there. I managed an import building at the Port of Houston, where it was a dedicated 3PL import facility. So I guess it's a good tie-in for me to come in for this building. So let me start out really by saying, I'll say just a couple of words about Tractor Supply, and then we'll talk about import-specific stuff, okay? So quickly about Tractor is very unique organization, has a very special niche, I think, compared to a lot of retailers. Tractor strives to be the world-class provider of maintenance products and farm products to farm and rural customers around the country. And I think has done a fantastic job over the years of selling that product and selling their name and providing the best service that they can to the customers. So when we talk about imports, I think it's always a challenge when you're talking about what I consider what started as a mom and pop company, that people come to Tractor Supply because they know the name. They trust the quality, they trust the reliability. I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with Tractor Supply stores, how many of y'all shop at Tractor Supply stores. But I will say, having come from other retail organizations, is they probably do as good or better of a job of any company I've seen where you walk in the store and the folks in the store are there to help the customer. They greet you, they ask you what you need, they help you, they'll carry it to your car for you. So it's old school in the sense of customer service, which I think still has a place in the world today, I hope. But Tractor Supply, everything we do, including the new concept of bringing imports through our own buildings, is based upon the mission and values of the company. So everything we do, we have to look at and make sure that, are we doing the right thing for the employees? Are we doing the right thing for the customers? Are we doing the right things for the carriers, for the vendors, for all the providers that we do business with? So let's talk a little bit just about what we're doing in Macon and kind of how all of this came to be. And let me start out before, my slides are really pretty basic. I really just wanted to talk to you more than I wanted to read off slides. But really when we talk imports, and I think whether or not you've been in the import business for many, many years, or I probably, like a lot of us, relatively new to large-scale import business. I think imports are shifting more to mainstream now versus where everything's handled by 3PLs. I think more companies are trying to handle the import volume themselves just because of the pure volume and quite honestly, the necessity and the price of stuff coming from overseas. So let's talk really the biggest advantages that I see running a building that deals with imports every day. And I think, folks, that if you're in the import business, that you would probably see similarly. Probably the world's greatest thing when you're talking imports is the fact that they're so predictable. You can look at your schedule. Things are loaded in Asia or wherever they may be coming from. They're put on a vessel. Unless something crazy happens with the weather, hurricane season, shutdowns at the port, you've got a pretty darn good idea when that container is going to hit the port. For us in Macon, everything's coming through the Port of Savannah, but it's very easy to plan your volume and easy to plan the labor required to process the containers. Now, that's not necessarily untrue on the domestic side, but it's a lot more true on the import side, because once it's put on a boat, it really doesn't change a whole lot, right? It's coming to you, you know the day it's going to show up. You got a pretty good idea the day that the port's going to unload it. If you've got a drayage carrier that's reliable and that you have faith in, they're going to put it on a chassis and they're going to haul it to you. So that's probably the single biggest advantage, is just advanced planning and the work that you have to do. The other thing that's great about imports versus, most of y'all have dealt with lots of domestic freight, I would assume, is the reliability, at least what we see and what I've seen in my past, is the ASN information is very, very accurate. Okay, and the reason is for obvious reasons, because it's coming from, 3, 4, 5,000 miles away. And so if they tell you there's 3,200 pieces on a container, there darn well better be 3,200 pieces on the container, right? So that's wonderful. So, and then the other thing is, I would say, is 99.99% of the time, when you crack open a container, it's going to have what you think is going to be in it. It's going to be in the quantities that you expect it in, and the container is definitely cubed out. Okay? So again, when you're planning capacity within a building, it's very reliable when you look at and you know how much space that you're going to need for everything to run through. So, biggest disadvantages from the import side, there's really not a tremendous amount of disadvantages. I would say at this point, probably one of the biggest challenges for some vendors that are coming internationally is the packaging. Vendors have continued to work on that and get better. Some of the cardboard has been questionable across the import business, not just Tractor Supply, but I think all companies out there. And so some things are challenging when it comes to stacking and the integrity of the boxing. You put it on a pallet, you put it in a hot distribution center, it sits for a few weeks, and then the cardboard starts to collapse. So we've got a wonderful group in Nashville at our corporate office that takes care of those kinds of things and works with the vendors. And I really think internationally, although the cost, everybody's pushing costs down, and one of the easiest places to push the cost out of is in the corrugate and in the packaging material. I think it's honestly, it's gotten better. And I think a lot of the vendors have been pretty responsive to getting things where we'd like them to be. So let's talk some specifics about Macon. We estimated about 7,000 container loads will move through the Port of Savannah annually. And that's up about 4,000 containers from what Tractor was doing through Savannah before Macon opened. Okay, so all import volume for Macon is expected to go solely through the Port of Savannah. Why is that? It's really purely just logistics. It's easy to get to our building in Macon. It's a 2-hour truckload that comes up, gets put on a chassis, and delivers to us. Now, the only disadvantage, I guess, to that premise, I forgot one disadvantage, is one of the challenges that you really have to fight through, and I've seen this throughout my career on the import side, is it gets difficult when you're dealing with the port managing the volume off of the port to your building. So what I mean by that is your drayage company or your carrier shows up at the port starts releasing the containers at a certain time in the morning generally. So you have to really work closely with your carrier, or what can and will happen to you is the trucks show up, you've got 30 drivers that show up at the port at one time, the port starts releasing the containers, the boxes are thrown on the chassis comes to the gate, and you look out and you've got 27 trucks lined up at the gate trying to get through. So that's the downside to the import piece. And so when they come in, really, as soon as they release it from the port, the clock starts ticking. And so you've only got so many hours or so many days that you get free time of that container before it needs to be back at the port and turned back in. So when it shows up at your gate, then internally your clock really starts moving fast at that point, because you know you've got to get it unloaded. Some of these containers may have as many as 5,000 boxes on them. They may have 300 or 400 SKUs on the trailer. Sometimes it may be one item with 3,500 boxes. So anyway, you've got to have the labor, you've got to get it unloaded, you've got to get the box freed up, and then you've got to get it released back to the port, or it starts costing you a lot more money, right? So Port of Savannah has 34 weekly vessel calls, which for us is advantageous. It's really, I think Savannah is a user-friendly port, and they've worked very closely with us, and we've been able to get stuff off the port when we need it without problems. Out of Macon, specifically, out of our distribution center, the concept for Tractor was this, is that previous to Macon, the import center, everything was coming out of the ports and was going directly to the other regional DCs around the country. Some of that was going to a third-party deconsolidator, not a lot. Most of it was going directly to the DCs. So what that meant was the other DCs would reach capacity issues quicker because they may only need 175 of these widgets, but they get a container that has 3,000 on it. So that could be a year's worth of sales for that item, which is, it's expensive, you all know, to put stuff in warehouse and to hold on to it for a year before you sell it. So you can't, if really when you operate under that concept, you almost can't build the buildings big enough. So what Macon has done is we bring everything in, we can do bulk buys, it comes in through the DC, we receive it in full pallet quantities, we put it away, and now we replenish the other distribution centers out of the import center. So we may get 1,000 widgets, but the other 5 DCs may only need 200 each, right? So whenever sales dictate that they need replenishment of that item, then it generates a replenishment request from the import center out to those DCs. So it works a lot better. Cordell, Georgia, Cordeal, we really haven't used a lot yet, but basically what that is, it's rail service from the port to Cordeal, and then you can dray it with the carrier from the rail yard in Cordeal up to the DC. It's a greener option only because you can move more containers at one time, and we're always looking for ways to be greener, and so that's probably going to improve as we go. Right now, most of it, quite honestly, is coming from the port on carrier. So Tractor Supply as a company, we estimate as many as 22,000 containers will be imported in 2014. 65% of that is East Coast. 95% of that East Coast is coming through Savannah now. There's a little bit coming up from the Northeast that goes directly to our Hagerstown, Maryland DC. Majority of it's coming through Macon, and then 35% is still coming through the West Coast, mostly Long Beach. And then it's drayed to the other DCs more sort of Midwest. So it's not an easy haul, but it's going to Indiana, Texas, those areas. Talked about most of that. Direct importing for Tractor Supply accounts for about 10% of the product in the stores. So I wanted to talk about that for just a second because 10% doesn't sound like a tremendous amount. But it's growing by 10 to 15% a year. So it doesn't take a long time before that volume really becomes significant. I think the challenge on the import side and what Tractor has managed to do a really good job of at this point or up to this point, and I think will continue to do, is our customer base are largely rural customers that are really driven by quality. So we have a customer base that we have established and maintained over the years because those customers know that when they walk in a Tractor store, they can find the product they're looking for and the quality that they need or would like. And our customers are very feed driven. So when they come in for dog food or for horse feed or cattle feed or cubes, those types of things, they also do a lot of secondary buying. So a lot of stuff in the stores, folks come in and they look at and they want to know that the quality's there. So when you're dealing with imports, there's probably an opportunity for the quality to go down on the product base that's coming from overseas. I haven't seen that. We haven't seen that. Tractor's been very happy with our vendors we're working with across the country and around the world. But we have to make sure on the import side that the quality is maintained. Very, very important because it doesn't take long, especially with our customer base, that if they buy something and they expect it to last 5 years and they use it 3 times and it falls apart, they're probably not going to come back. All right? So watching the product that comes in through the port is very important. So significant, I said it once, I'll say it again, 10 to 15% growth rate a year in imports. That's not going to slow down. That's probably conservative from what reality is going to be. I think that number will continue to grow. Right now, most everything's coming through Savannah. In years to come, I think product will be coming in multiple ports around the country for the company. So that's about it. Hopefully that gave you some idea of what we're doing. And I would certainly be available to talk to folks, especially if you're new to the import side, and you're trying to get set up and you'd like to talk about some of the challenges that you see in trying to get an import operation set up, then I'd be happy to do that. So thank you.
Great, Kyle. That was fantastic. I think it really gave an excellent snapshot of Tractor's inbound supply chain, and I'm sure we'll get into more of it in the Q&A section. I'm going to welcome up Becky Bowling. Becky is Director of International Logistics at Floor & Decor, which is a hard surface flooring specialty retailer with 39 stores in 12 states. Please join me in welcoming Becky.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good morning. So we've heard a lot about tuna, tractors. Now we're going to hear about tile and stone, basically heavy flooring, hard surface flooring. So I wanted to give a little highlight of who Floor & Decor is. We are a regional retailer. Hopefully if you're from Atlanta, you've heard of us. But if you're from other areas, we may not have a store. So as Chris mentioned, we are a specialty retailer of hard surface flooring, and we really stick to that. So we want to be the best at hard surface flooring, and that's it. We provide great service. Our philosophy is that we believe flooring is a fashion item, and we want to make sure that we are in sync with what the market wants. So why you see locally focused company on this slide is we empower our store managers. We actually call them CEM, Chief Executive Merchants, and they really own the assortment, obviously with the help of our buyers at the corporate office, for understanding what the local market wants. So if you visit one of our stores in Miami, for instance, the assortment is quite different than what you would see in our Chicago store, and we really think that's a part of what makes us special, our secret sauce, if you will. So the products, anything related to hard surface flooring and all the accessories. And we want to stand out as being the best price, always in stock, and provide great service. And that's if you're for a do-it-yourself customer or also a contractor. We don't offer installation services. We see that as a key customer for ours. They come in every week, so we want to make sure that we're not competing with our customers. So a little bit about where we are. So we've got 39 stores. As you can see, there's a lot of areas where we're not in. So we believe that the runway for growth is long. We operate 4 DCs. They are in Los Angeles, Houston, Savannah, and down in Miami. So this is probably the most interesting for the group, kind of an overview of our supply chain. Our import penetration is considerably higher than what Kyle mentions for Tractor Supply. We do have domestic product as well. But because we rely heavily on imported products, that's why you saw our DCs are very port-centric. And we think that's important for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of our product is heavy, so we want to be close to the port. It makes it easier to move. So as you see from the slide, we source from multiple factories throughout the world. China, of course, is very large in the mix, but we also source from Europe, the Med, South America, and Mexico as well. We have different terms of sale depending on the region and the vendors. So we do have some ex-works and some FOB. We try to be an easy customer for the ocean carriers. And by what I mean by that is we are strictly port to port, and we don't get into the chassis discussions because our draymen have the triaxles that are needed to move the heavy product. And we found that's useful in working with the ocean carriers to provide more competitive rates. And as I said, we operate 4 DCs. Our mix, we're pretty evenly split. You can see from the store, we are more heavily on the East Coast. And we really just, when we looked at our distribution strategy, we're actually expanding our DC in Savannah, so we're moving into a new building. And given our growth and where we see the projected stores to be in the next few years, we were looking about, do we stay at 4 distribution centers, or do we go to a 5th, say up the Mid-Atlantic or New York, New Jersey, because we do expect to have stores in that region eventually. And when we looked at a 2 to 3 year period, we found it was more cost effective to actually expand our Savannah DC. And that really came from looking at what the main driver in terms of total landed cost. So we really look at things, we want to make sure we know what it's going to cost to get that tile from China all the way to our store in Atlanta. And we looked at the cost, including the dray cost and things like that, the lease cost. It really made sense for us to expand in Savannah rather than moving up the East Coast. I think it served us well with some of the issues in New York, New Jersey. We haven't had to deal with it because we don't import any containers there. The other things that we looked at, we looking at utilization. Kyle mentioned how important it was to get the containers cubed out. Most of our containers don't cube out, they weigh out. And it's very important for us to be able to maximize the amount of product that we can get on the container. Certainly states like Georgia that have an overweight permit, that is very advantageous to other states that don't. So that's a real compelling reason for us to be in Georgia, just one more reason for us to be in Georgia. And then we obviously want to minimize touch points. We don't do a lot of consolidation and deconsoling simply because it gets expensive to retouch the tile. Our category, for instance, the transportation could be 50, 60, 70% of the total cost. So pennies matter. So the number of touches and the amount you can get into the containers really make a difference. So that's one of also main issues. In our company, transportation is looked at perhaps more closely than in others because we are such a huge percentage of the cost of goods sold. So the other challenges that we're facing is we're very growth oriented. We want to make sure that our network is sustainable, not for the 40 stores we have today, but hopefully the 80, the 120, the 200 plus stores we'll have for tomorrow. So we're constantly looking at, will our model work, and how can we make it better? So from that standpoint, we're really focused on efficiency. How do we get the most out of our service providers? How do we outsource as much of the transactional activities as we can, and in-house keep the strategic capabilities? So that's a quick overview of Floor and Decor. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you. I know I went through it quickly.